How do you find the will to fight back against a world that wants to keep you sedated, average, and stuck in place? Join us for the tools and strategies you need to create a life of abundance, discipline, and high achievement. This is the Tactical Empire with Jeff Smith.
Welcome to another episode of the Tactical Empire. What is up, Sean? How are you, man?
I am good. I'm ready to rock. Wearing all black today. If I sit just right, it looks like I'm a floating head because the wall behind me is black. So where are you guys at? You guys actually went back to Houston, didn't you, for Christmas?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. We're doing a month in Houston. We are, I think, 2 weeks into it, and we were talking last night. We kind of think that 2 weeks is kind of our sweet spot to stay places. Because like now I'm already getting antsy. I feel like we've been here forever, and I'm like, it's forever until we leave. So like, when are we traveling again? Because we're pulling out of here.
I'm tired of getting groceries from the same grocery store. I want to try a different grocery store.
You could never live this life, dude, ever.
I think when I'm old, I might be one of those guys, but I definitely wouldn't be in an RV. I'm just going to rent the nicest Airbnb in every major city that I want to go to in small towns. So that's my style. I like to find the really nice Airbnbs and stay in those for a few days. So, we just wrapped up some good episodes ending this year. For me personally, I mentioned on the last one that we cash out refied the first two BRRRR properties, and you made a few comments about that, directed at me, saying, "Hey, the BRRRR strategy that we implemented this year is probably the best change that I made this year for long-term wealth, even though it was a different strategy and isn't really cash flowing right now." So we've talked, and we talked to the men in the group about this, but you have way more experience in it than I. Is like BRRRRs, LTRs, long-term rentals, they're not a get rich quick scheme. They take time. You have to let them marinate. And I'm feeling that, full transparency to the people, all right? Like, okay, 6 months, we got our first two properties, we're gonna cycle the money, we're gonna get two more. So how do people need to go about when they're in the early stages of investing in LTRs or BRRRRs? How do they get past the monotony, the slow process? How do they not, burnout's probably not the right term, but you said on other podcasts, the normal real estate investor owns less than 10 properties. Okay. So what you've said on other podcasts, oh, sorry, 3. Sorry. Okay. So let me correct. The average real estate investor owns 3 properties, right? So it's
Or less. 95%.
95% own 3 properties or less. Okay. It's kind of like podcasts, right? Everyone starts a podcast, but if you can get maybe it's podcast episodes. If you can get to 10 episodes, you're in the top, like 0.5% of podcast episodes, right? Doesn't mean anyone's listening to it, but you've done the work. So with real estate, like, it doesn't take much to win, but it certainly takes time, and you got to get more than 3 properties, especially if you're in the LTRs. So how do you go about talking to someone like me that's super early in the process, that hasn't cycled the money yet? And it may not be like the detailed tactical side of the investing. You need to talk to the psychology of the person now as a new LTR investor.
The psychology of it is 99.9% of it, 100%. Like, I mean, it's everything when you're starting, because like I say, like that 3 properties to 10 properties is like the no man's land. It's kind of like where it's not fun yet. Everything still feels like an expense. It's slow. You don't see how it's going to fucking ever pay off. I tell this story all the time because like you maybe, excuse me, sorry. Maybe you're sitting there having this conversation with your wife and you're like, hey, let's get into real estate investing. And everybody's gung ho about it. And they're like, yeah, let's do it. And you go identify your first property. You get the first one done. And at the end of the cycle, you end up cash flowing $250. So like you're popping champagne bottles and shit at the title company when you buy your first property, and then you get your first check and it's $200, and you're like, wah wah wah. And so it really is a game of attrition as far as making sure that you're still working the product, because you have to understand the 5 ways that you make money in real estate, because it's not all cash that comes into your bank. Like, that's obvious, and that's front external validation, front loaded dopamine response. Money went into my account. I get it. The other ways you make money are in a lot of the phantom gains, through depreciation, through tax advantages, through cost segregation, like all this different shit that we teach people. But you have to really understand that you're playing the long game. I tell everybody that's investing in long-term rentals, you have to understand that. There's no reason to do it if you're going to buy 2 of them. And there's no reason to do it if you're not going to stay in the game. Like, you need to go in with like a long-term perspective that we're going to do this for the next 3 years, and we're going to double our doors every year. So even if you buy 1 the first year, you're going to buy 2 the second year, which puts you at 3. You're going to buy 4 the third year, which puts you at 7. So now you're almost there. So like, if you buy 8 the 4th year, now you've got 15 properties, and now things are starting to get fun. Like, there's actual real money in the bank account. There's a couple $1,000s getting stacked every month. And so it's really just like understanding that it's a long-term game. Like, we have a guy in our inner circle who quit his fucking job this year, in like two months ago or something. And he's like, I'm going to be a full-time real estate investor. And I had numerous conversations with him before he did that, because he made good money. He made mid 6 figures, not mid 6 figures, over like 150 grand to 200 grand. And so like, it's not nothing to replace that salary. So I got on the phone with him and I gave him like cold hard advice. Like, he's like, I've got this much money saved. I hate my job. And I'm like, okay, I support it. But here's the reality of what you're doing. You're not going to go out and buy 10 single family homes and that's going to replace your salary. That's not going to happen. There's no fucking way. I'm not going to sugarcoat this. Like, this is a long-term gain. So what we did was we put together a plan for him based on his savings, based on what he wanted to do. And so he's like flipping 1 house out of every 3 for cash flow. And so he's doing the damn thing. He's working his ass off and he's doing great. But you always need a balance on like short-term money, mid-term money, long-term money type thing. You need.
Never mind. Finish your comments. Sorry to cut you off.
You need that balance in your strategy. I mean, that's how, like, I've lived for a while. I mean, since you would consider me pseudo, I guess, retired, besides running like the couple companies we do, I don't think I'm retired at all. My wife says I'm retired all the time, but like, for me, like, it's just that simple balance of like, oh, quickly you're recouping the money, and you need that balance of cash flow deals versus wealth accumulation deals versus like short tail versus long tail payouts.
Let's be clear. You are sitting in the bedroom of an RV talking on a podcast to me. You're not retired? I know you work your ass off. Jeff is definitely not retired. Oh, well, I kind of like that. I mean, we talk about variety. I say we. You're the guru when it comes to real estate. Really, it's like there's so many strategies for us to implement, and so for this individual, right, buy 3 properties, hold 2, flip 1. What did the finances look like for that, right? If he's buying if he's buying $70,000 properties, put in an extra 30 or 40 into them, so he's getting $110,000 in a property, and he can sell them for 160. Right? So 1 property every what, 5-6 months. If he nets 45 on the flip, that would come out to what, a $15,000 average month income? Or sorry, I'm doing math wrong. 5 months. I was thinking 3 months. 8 to 12.
Yeah, ideally you want to be like 50 cents on the dollar all in for a flip. And so like, I mean, you could push to 70 cents on the dollar. So the way you do it is you buy it at a 30% discount and then you back out any repairs you're going to make. So like, the actual purchase price is somewhere about 50 cents on the dollar. So like, if you go in and you're like, the ARV on this thing is $200,000, you're starting at 140 and then you're backing out your repair costs, because 140 would be 70%. And so you want to get down somewhere around like 50 cents on the dollar for the purchase. So you'd want to be somewhere around buying it for like 90 or 100 and then keeping your repairs at like 20 to 30, hopefully, because there's waste and overages at every level of flipping. So yes, the idea of what we're trying to get him is 50K every 2 or 3 months. And so that gives him pocket money, walking around money, not having to necessarily affect his life or day to day that much as far as like a lifestyle change. And so it works out nicely from that perspective for him. And he's done a good job. He's done 2 flips, I think, so far. And I think he's got 6 rentals.
Nice. Okay, so let's get back to the comment that you made on last podcast episode, which was the LTRs, the BRRRs, are going to be the wealth play long term. So psychologically, you gotta be thinking of the long term play here. But now, how does that actually happen? We know real estate makes money 5 different ways, but you buy 1 year 1, you buy 2 year 2, that's 3 properties. You buy 4 year 3, that's 7 properties. You buy 8 year 4, that's 15 properties. So now what are you sitting on 7 years later, right? You're like, it takes 7, get 7 years into the game. Then what are you looking at, right? Now you're 25, 40, 50 properties deep. And then what? And then what do? You're taking the cash flow, or you could change your strategy. What have you seen people do at that level?
I think there's 2 ways to go at that point. You can go the portfolio real estate company vertically integrated direction. If you want to stay in kind of that asset class, in my opinion, that's the only way to go. Like you need to then scale up to hundreds of properties. You need a construction company, a management company, an acquisition company, a brokerage, and whatever else I'm missing here. Like that's the model you would go to. Or the reason that we teach BRRRRs is because it's the least lowest barrier of entry to make your first $1 million is the way that I describe it. Like if you don't have $1 million of net worth yet, and you're not sitting on $500,000 of cash to deploy, like BRRRRing is the best way to penetrate the marketplace and make your first $1 million of net worth, if you will, because you're going to be able to do that.
Yeah. No, to the beginners, like if they can even fathom that statement, right? So if they don't have $1 million net worth, how does the $1 million net worth come into play? So talk to us like we're in first grade.
Yeah. So essentially when I'm BRRRRing, I'm doing a BRRRR right now. So I'll give you like the information on it. I bought it for $83,000. I'm going to end up putting $19,000 in it. So let's just call that 20. So I'm at 103. I've got $3,000 of closing costs to refinance it. So I'll put me at 106. The ARV on that thing is $165,000. Okay. And so I'm at 106. Let's just call it 105. 165 is the ARV. So I made $65,000 to my personal bottom line on that acquisition by doing that work. So that got me 60 grand. So let's just say I make $50,000 a house from an equity standpoint. So then if you do,
right? Yeah, that's net worth.
yeah. So if you're doing if you're doing a balance sheet, it's showing you $50,000 per property of equity. So let's just say it's 150 and you owe 100 on it, right? It's worth 150, you owe 100. You own 50% or $50,000 worth of equity in that property. If you have 20 of those, you've got $1 million worth of equity.
Okay. So there's your net worth, right? Net worth doesn't put food on the table. So obviously these properties are cash flowing, they have tax advantages. What are you personally doing with these now in the situation you're in? Are you cash out refining as much as you can, or are you leaving the equity in for now because you don't need the cash after that? What are you doing, and what do you suggest most people do?
Well, so if you let's just use the example of you're getting to 20 properties. What am I doing? I am currently raising rents. So for us, we had to raise rents to the point where it made sense to do the cash out refi. And I haven't done any cash out refis because I don't want to lock into 2% more interest right now. So I am just raising the rents like gangbusters as fast as we can and increasing cash flow from that standpoint and letting those kind of just marinate. We own 40 rental properties still. Of just Kirsten and we own. And so that's what we're doing with that particular portion of our portfolio. What you need to do is if you're that person that buys 20, gets to the $1 million worth of net worth at this point, but we'll just call it $1 million of equity to not confuse things. Now you've got real money that you can roll up and invest in some real shit with. So like, let's say you go to sell your 20 houses, you sell them at a bit of a discount so you can sell them all at once, right? And you walk away from the transaction table with $800,000 cash. So if you do that, and now you've done the work for 3 years, let's call it. You built your 20 house portfolio in 3 years. And to do that, you've had to lay out a little bit of money, right? Not a lot of money. The deal I just told you about is still I'm going to make $8,000 on that deal I told you back in my pocket at the end of the day. I could make more depending on the reef. When the refi comes out, I might walk away with 25 grand from that closing table. So like I did that deal. It's taken me 3 weeks, a month. I might, depending on how I want to structure the thing, I might put 25,000 in my pocket and then walk away with only, instead of $60,000 of equity, I might only walk away with like $35,000 of equity. But it doesn't matter because I added $25,000 in cash today.
Yeah, the cash is so good. My psychology, I like that.
Yep. And so what I would do in the scenario that I'm telling you is get that $800,000 free and clear. And that gives you lendability of what? 3 times that, which is what? 2.4 million? 2.4 million. So now you're getting rid of your 20 single family houses because you don't want to be in that asset class anyway. You just used it to generate $800,000 of gains for you to get started. And now you go buy a $2.4 million asset, whatever it is, triple net commercial building or an apartment complex. Maybe you buy an apartment, but you upgrade the class that you bought. So you might buy a 8-unit apartment complex that's a class B property that has higher rents than anything you're doing. So like now you're moving up in asset classes. The income coming in is much higher. The quality of tenant is upgraded because now you're buying a more expensive asset class that's a more desirable asset class. And so your overall net returns may be a little bit lower, but it's going to appreciate faster and you're dealing with less headaches because you went from 20 tenants to 8 tenants. And so now, and also, I mean, this is the same thing we shared when you bought your building. The same thing I shared with you is that you moved to a $2.4 million asset from so you turn your 800,000 into 2.4 million. And like, when you think about the deductions or the appreciation on 5%, 5% of 2.4 million is fucking what? I don't know. 120,000 every year. So like you're talking about adding $120,000 to your bottom line again every single year. So now you've got, and that's phantom wealth gains. It's unrealized wealth gains at this point, but you're making 6 figures even though you're not doing anything for it. So for me, I would build the big portfolio, vertically integrated, big ass company, or you roll up your single family homes and go into different asset classes that are more efficient and have more upside. Because as soon as you can take your $1 million worth of houses and turn it into $3 million worth of assets, the game is leverage and speed. So every time you can roll that up, so your 8-unit apartment for $2.4 million, as soon as you get an offer on that thing for 4.2, You go ahead and walk away with the $1.8 million delta that you just made on that. You turned your 800,000 into 1.8 million, and then you go buy a $5 million asset. And you just keep cycling the leverage.
Ladies and gentlemen, hopefully you had your notebook, Sal. All of that masterclass came from Mama Last podcast. So I don't know. I don't really have a follow-up question to that. That was pretty darn good. So what other people sent to the people?
I like simplifying things because I mean, like, I know that got complex and complicated and down the road, but like, this is why we.
But then there's the shit that they're gonna go through that makes them. And I've vocalized this to you. The process is simple, but then they're still dealing with shit along the way. And getting through that shit is where the mindset and psychology comes into play, to where like you have to just fucking handle it. And that's the upper part, I think.
Well, and that takes us back to the very beginning of this podcast. That's why 99% of people quit. It's not worth it. The first time you take a call and somebody's got a shitty toilet at 2 a.m. and like, it becomes not worth it. That $200 is not worth it when you're getting calls on Christmas Eve. We had 27 properties with burst pipes on Christmas Eve 3 years ago. It cost me $115,000 cash to fix that shit, because you're not filing insurance claims on issues that are $300 to $17,000 depending on water damage, right? You're not filing a bunch of insurance claims because our insurance is already crazy as hell down by the Gulf Coast. And so for me, that was a cash deal. Like, you know how many people would have quit real estate altogether if that happened to them?
Like, that's a question that's always in the back of my head. But we've kind of seen this in the group with some of the guys that are new to real estate. Is like, okay, whether it's $115,000 cash or just $15,000 cash. So these guys buy a property, and within the first 3 months, there's a major expense. It could be something that they should have found in the inspection, or just, again, even Airbnb, my retaining wall fucking fell over. That was very, very expensive. I did not file insurance because it was hurricane, so they weren't going to cover shit anyways, right? So where does quote, I'm doing air quotes for those of you not watching the video, where does the small time investors find the money to fix the shit? So yeah, there's the psychology of getting through the shit, but then there's actually having the funds to get through the shit. So if someone doesn't have the cash, maybe they only have enough money to do one property. How do they survive? How do they get the 5 properties? I mean, maybe it is because they have to make the property's value enough to cash out enough money to have the cash reserves early on. But when you've seen people like in shitty situations, figuratively or literally, where do they get the capital?
Well, I mean, yeah, I think that you need capital reserves. That's why you don't take your profits out of your houses until you're way down the road. You need like 6 months of rent. Like, whatever rent you're charging for that thing, you need 6 months of that in your capital reserves account before you even think about taking any of the proceeds off of there. So the way I teach BRRRing to people, like, you don't need a lot. I mean, the deal I'm telling you is not, I don't tell you about it to brag about it, but like, I've done so many of these, like upwards towards 100 BRRRRs, that like, by the time I was done doing them, like, I didn't pay any money of my own money at all. Now, if you're the first time you're ever doing that, like, that is not an expectation you should have. But I would tell you that an expectation you could have is that your all in cash out of pocket could very conceivably be between $5,000 and $15,000, which, to own an entire rental property for $5,000 to $15,000 that's going to pay you forever, and add all those things we talked about. So for $5,000, if you could capture $60,000 worth of equity and a cash flowing asset that's going to pay you $350 a month, is that worth it? I would say 10 out of 10, yes. So but about the expenses, I wouldn't get too hung up about it, except for the fact that, make sure, like we teach, you need liquidity. So I would go get a 0% credit card for 21 months or whatever they're slinging them now, 24 months. And I would put my expenses on that every bit of it that I could to start. And then I would make the house pay for it back. Like, one of the big things I'm big on teaching as well is that, like, you should treat every individual asset like its own business. So, like, it needs to stand on its own 2 feet and be profitable. Even if that profit is only like $1,100 at the end of the year, like, because we're talking smaller numbers because it's a cheaper house and the rent's low or whatever, right? Like, it, but it needs to be able to cash flow itself, and it needs to be able to take care of its own expenses for the most part, unless you're a far more sophisticated investor and you're doing appreciation investing and things like that. And, like, that's speculative and not something that I recommend for newbies at all. I mean, I got a guy I used to talk to that was a client in the Tactical Empire. He had whatever, he was worth $9 or $10 million, and he had a bunch of properties that he put $400 a month into paying them, but they had appreciated so quickly because of the areas he bought. He might have had $800,000 in equity in a property, and he was paying $400 a month out of his own pocket to cover the delta on that thing, but it was making him like 200 grand a year in appreciation. So he was spending $4,800 to keep the property his. That was his bleed rate. He was losing that amount of money, $5,000 to make $200,000. And so, would you do that? It depends on how much cash flow you have and what you do in a job, right? Like, that's why I pound on everybody in the group. It's easier to make $10,000, an extra $10,000 a month, than it is to fucking save $10,000. Like, that's where people miss the mark all the time. It's just such a scarcity mindset that always has people figuring out where they would get more money from. Go watch some YouTube videos, add some skills, and make some more money. Like, I mean, I know that sounds bad, probably, or people could misinterpret that and think I'm a dickhead or something, but, like, ultimately, at the end of the day, you've got tons of opportunity to raise your personal income. All right, guys, we had some technical issues, but hopefully you enjoyed that episode on BRRRing. Go ahead and join us in the Tactical Empire community. We talk about real estate. We talk about infinite banking. We talk about investing in businesses. If you guys have any questions, hit us up. Let us know. We can be reached on Instagram, Facebook, whatever. Send us a message if you have any questions. Let's get your financial house in order in 2025 so you can start making progress. Have a kick-ass week, and we will see you soon.